In the last few years, strident voices of atheism have started to get some exposure in the mass media, and there have even been several televised debates between notable atheists and theists. But all the debates have quickly degenerated into an I am right and you are wrong slanging match, with little or no tolerance on either side for the other side's opinion, making them about as enlightening as watching a boxing match, or bear baiting, or cockfighting, or a pissing up the wall contest, providing no insight into anything other than the forceful personalities of the speakers. Jacob Bronowski's splendid essay on the ascent of man is a cinematic masterpiece exposition on human development, but he wisely refrained from putting his head on the block by daring to mention the R word. So it's about time someone unwise did. It's about time someone put together all the scattered bits and pieces of anthropology and archaeology and drew a picture of the ascent of man's religions, so we can all see where they came from and what they mean. So I've done it, tracing the historical development of the world's religions in the previous episodes of this video series. In researching the subject, I was surprised to find that the genealogy of the major religions of today is so direct that the meme family tree of imaginary gods can be written on a single A4 page. That was the easy part. The hard part starts here, to explain not just how, but why religions are so pervasive and so persuasive. It's hard because only an explanation that makes sense to both the believer and the non-believer has any chance of getting us out of the spiral of mutual disrespect. The time for circular argument debates is over. Now it's time for investigation, time to seek common ground, time for truth and reconciliation. For without that, we are all going to hell in a handbasket woven by war profiteers like those who financed both sides of both the First and Second World Wars so that they would profit whichever side won, setting a modus operandi that their inheritors are still pursuing to this very day. The earliest religions were the earliest sciences, the first philosophies, the first axioms of cause and effect. But as the multitudes flocked to grasp at the straws that were dangled before them, a commercial opportunity opened, and the conmen moved in. Profiteers like the self-proclaimed messiahs Ryohei Okawa, Sun Myung Moon, L. Ron Hubbard, David Koresh, Shoko Asahara, Apollo Creboloi, Zhao Weishan, and God knows who else. Religion gives its faithful meaning to their lives, a sense of purpose, and the promise of an afterlife. Ancient Egyptian rulers were obsessed by immortality. The pyramids were built to reflect the constellation of Orion, to direct the soul of a dead pharaoh to fly to inseminate the goddess Isis, the star Sirius, so she could give birth to the reincarnation of the pharaoh as his successor. The Veda religion, says that after death we are reincarnated in a new body, either up or down the caste system, depending on how well we had lived our previous life. A cynic might call this a cynical manipulation of the populace into accepting their place in the social hierarchy, so that the elite could enjoy their privileged positions without risking a French Revolution of liberté, égalité, et fraternité. The child is father of the man, and every man is an adult body wrapped around the mind of an inner child, in turn wrapped around an inner baby that tries to call back into the safety of its womb cave when nightmare monsters appear on the horizon or move in next door. Religion is a rock of safety above the boiling sea of biological, sociological, and physical reality, a haven for its inculcated to escape their mundane troubles and dream of one day being in a heavenly nirvana, promised wonderland, Alhambra, Xanadu, Eden, just so long as they pay their dues into the collecting plate of the high priests of the great leader. Where, then, is there any place for common ground, for a meeting of minds, for reconciliation and harmony? Such a tough question. But the answer is surprisingly simple to locate. It lies in understanding the human psyche, its physical form, its function, its operation, and its evolution, in understanding who and what you are. But although the answer is easy to identify, it's harder to explain in a few words, because the human psyche is a product of the human brain, which is a complex biological computer made of 100 billion neurons, each having up to 10,000 connections to other neurons, sensory cells, and other body cells via the information superhighways of the body, the nervous system, and the endocrine system. One can no more decipher the brain by inspecting all its neurons one by one than one could decipher the program of an electronic computer by examining all its individual transistors. However, electronic computers have an architecture, one designed by the mind of man. The human brain has an architecture too, one designed by the human genome. Like the anatomy of the human body, the anatomy of the human brain has evolved over millions of years. It has an architecture of 3 main layers. We share the outer layer, called the cortex, with other primates, and we share the middle layer, the limbic system, with other mammals, and we share the innermost layer at the base of the brain stem, with other vertebrates, including crocodiles and chickens. Actually, crocodiles and chickens also have a primitive limbic system and cortex, but they are more developed in mammals and primates, respectively. The cortex has 2 hemispheres, left and right, connected by the corpus callosum, which is more highly developed in females than in males. This may be one reason why women are better at talking while doing something requiring hand-eye coordination at the same time, such as playing tennis or knitting. It used to be thought that only mammals could experience emotions because their faces are more like ours and we can easily see the emotions they are feeling on their faces. But recently, Antonio Damasio and other neuroscientists have found physical evidence that the most ancient parts of the brain stem and hypothalamus, play key roles in the perception of feelings. Just as most people can't imagine that crocodiles could have feelings, they also can't imagine how electronic computers could have them either. Because they don't know what feelings are. They only know how their own feelings feel when they are experiencing them. We can imagine what another person is feeling by reading their facial expressions, vocalizations, and body language. But it's harder to do that when there are no facial expressions we can identify. And we've been trained since birth to believe that humans are special, closer to God than the beasts of the field. And the very idea that we are nothing but intelligent plastic machines is abhorrent to most people. So Cynthia Brazil, the designer of Kismet, programmed it to express its artificial feelings via voice tone and face and head movements that someone interacting with it could instantly recognize.
Cynthia Brazil started working with me on our first humanoid cog, and then she developed the robot Kismet, a sociable robot.
If we want to build a robot that can interact with people, communicate with people, and learn from people, it has to also be social, because that's the way that people are going to try to teach it and the way they're going to try to communicate to it.
Hello, Kismet.
Kismet is an anthropomorphic robotic head that is specialized for face-to-face interaction between humans and this robot. So a lot of the sensors, the actuators, the degrees of freedom have all been specialized for sending as well as receiving the social cues that people very naturally expect that would happen between something like a mother and her infant. Kismet has a very expressive and complicated face. There are a total of 21 motors that have been packed all into Kismet's head and neck system. The robot can perceive people through vision. There are actually 4 cameras on the robot. 9 computers alone are used for vision. Kismet can express in 3 modalities. One is through tone of voice. Another is through facial expression. And body posture is also critical. So approaching, leaning forward when it likes something, withdrawing when it doesn't like something. So we've brought in human subjects who've never interacted with the robot before to engage the robot, to evaluate, do they find the interaction enjoyable and natural.
You're such a cute little robot. You'll be so serious.
They're going to have to know if the robot understood them, and this is done through the robot's expressive abilities.
I love you. Oh, did he say he loves me? I love you too.
So another important skill for the robot to be able to learn from people is being able to recognize communicative intent.
Very good, Kismet.
And the way we've done that with Kismet right now is to have the robot recognize by tone of voice.
Yes.
Are you praising it? Are you scolding it?
Where'd you put your body?
So it's not only the ability to be robust and to perform tasks in a complex world and to be able to understand language, but to understand empathy, to be able to relate to people, to be able to form friendships.
Is your favorite color blue?
These are the aspects that I consider to be intimately a part of a sociable machine.
I think we have something going on. Oh, I think there's something here between us. Stop, you gotta let me talk. Stop. Shh, 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 shh. Kismet, I think we got something going on here. You and me.
Because Kismet exists in a social world, it has access to these special kinds of interactions that I believe could play such a critical and beneficial role in promoting the robot's own development and continued learning.
Neuroscience is starting to discover that this objective experience of feeling and emotion is the place where the mind meets the body. Your feelings are your conscious perceptions of physiological events happening in your body, which are prompted by thoughts that you are thinking, which have been triggered by your perceptions of what is happening to you or around you, whether it's what someone said, or a story you are reading, or a TV drama, or a brick hitting you in the head, or you're smelling the scent of a woman, or a man, as the case may be, or a baby, or delicious food, or an ache in your stomach, or leg, or little finger, or just something you imagined or dreamt. Our brains are emotion machines. Emotions provoked by external events detected by the senses are survival mechanisms, mechanisms which have emerged over millions of years of evolution because they protect the genome by protecting the organism in which it dwells long enough for it to reproduce its genes. A few unfortunate people cannot sense pain and place themselves in great danger because of this. Even rarer are people who have all their senses but cannot experience emotions because of damage to the brainstem or hypothalamus caused by accident or disease. This makes them unable to express emotion, which causes other people to avoid them. Centuries ago, such people were regarded as insane or evil, but fortunately for them, medical science has advanced public knowledge since the medieval times when left-handed people were called sinister, after the Latin word for left, and burned at the stake as witches. Our emotions are our primal instincts. We instinctively respond when an attractive stranger hoves into view, or a dangerous animal rustles in the bushes. Primal instincts are older than the discovery of fire about 1 million years ago, as evidenced by the lack of fear demonstrated by very young children towards it, who have to be taught that it's dangerous because they are attracted to its dancing light. On the other hand, Fear of heights is a primal instinct, presumably one that found its way into the genome several million years ago when we were tree dwellers, and only those that took care not to fall from great heights survived long enough to reproduce. Perhaps the strongest instinct of all is the attachment to and dependence on mother. During the Second World War, Japanese infantry rushing into battle were heard to yell, "Okaasan! Okaasan!" This observation didn't make the Allied press or the boys' comic of the Allies, which instead had them yelling, "Banzai!" The latter war cry was one drilled into Japanese soldiers during military training. It means, "Long live the Emperor." It's the Japanese equivalent of England's "God Save the King" and Islamic soldiers' "Allah Akbar," which is the Muslim prayer soundbite repeated over and over in mosques, as often as the Lord's Prayer is repeated in Christian churches. God is great. But Okaasan was not put into Japanese soldiers' minds by military training. Instead, it is a primal scream of fear, a cry for help. It means, "Mother!" The very first religion was a mother religion, which venerated the moon as the astral mother, the giver of life with the power to cause pregnancy. After the agricultural revolution, the sun assumed even greater prominence, and Sumerian and Babylonian patriarchies wasted no time in asserting the primacy of the male sun over the female moon. To complete the revolution, the moon's role as mother and wife of the sun was given to the planet Venus, and the moon was gender reassigned and relegated to the secondary role of causing earthquakes by his stamping bull feet. Thousands of years later, the social revolutionary gentle Jesus was conflated with the vengeful warrior god Yahweh, and then with the shining Roman sun god Mithra, whilst the Babylonian moon god Sin was deemed to be a bad influence, and conflated with witchcraft in medieval Europe, creating the somewhat inconsistent Christianity credo with an answer for everything that nevertheless persisted for 2,000 years due to the political power of first the Roman Empire and then the propaganda of the Roman Catholic Church, so that even the Reformation Protestant retained the image of an all-powerful, heavenly Father, Good Shepherd. If there is any common ground to be found between religion and humanism, it lies in the social teachings of Jesus, which reflect the human instinct for cooperation and neighborliness. We are pack animals who have achieved our evolutionary success by working together. No man is an island, entire of itself. No man could build a pyramid by himself, although the builder of the Watts Towers had a pretty good try.
The most powerful drive in the ascent of man is his pleasure in his own skill. He loves to do what he does well, and having done it well, he loves to do it better. You see it in his science. You see it in the magnificence with which he carves and builds, the loving care, the gaiety, the effrontery. The monuments are supposed to commemorate kings and religions, heroes, dogmas, but in the end, the man they commemorate is the builder. I could not end this essay without taking you to my favorite monument, built by a man who had no more scientific equipment than the Gothic mason. These are the Watts Towers in Los Angeles, built by an Italian called Simon Rodia. He came from Italy to the United States at the age of 12, and then at the age of 42, having worked as a tile setter and general repairman, he suddenly decided in his back garden to build these tremendous structures. out of chicken wire, bits of railway tie, steel rods, cement, seashells, bits of broken glass and tile, of course, anything that he could find or that the neighborhood children could bring him. It took him 33 years to build them. He never had anyone to help him because he said, "I never knew what to do next myself." He finished them in 1954. He was 75 by then. He gave the house, the garden, and the towers to a neighbor and simply walked out. I had in mind to do something big, Simon Rodier had said, and I did. You have to be good, or bad, to be remembered. He'd learnt his engineering skill as he went along by doing, and by taking pleasure in the doing. Of course, the city building department decided that the towers were unsafe, and in 1959, they ran a test on them. This is the tower that they tried to pull down. I'm happy to say that they failed.
The only hope for world peace is if we can learn to love our neighbor, even if we don't like his music, or his barking dog, or the color he paints his house, or the football team he supports. Because we humans are pack animals. Like our cousins the chimpanzees, we have evolved to belong to a troop, a group, a tribe, a family, and find meaning to our lives in the relationships within the group that we cherish. However, we are also like our other cousins, the orangutans, the adult males of which live solitary existences, meeting only briefly to mate and then disappear back into the forest again. Male orangutans avoid each other, avoiding conflict, whereas male chimpanzees are constantly squabbling for position within the social hierarchy. Perhaps humans share some of the characteristics of both our cousins, being at one and the same time both social animals and independently minded ones. But how are these instincts embodied in the physiology of the brain? How does the brain construct the psyche? It's easier to answer the second question first. The psyche is the behavior of the brain. It's what we observe in others by what they do, by how they react. It's analogous to the behavior of electronic computer hardware running a software program. The biological brain and the biological body is a network of von Neumann machines we call cells, which are made of what Dennis Bray calls wetware, because the inside of our cells is mostly water. Personally, I think of the machinery of the cell as plasticware because it is the proteins, lipids, and other molecules that do the actual computing in a cell. Artificial plastics are long, flexible hydrocarbon chains made from crude oil, which is made of the decayed dead bodies of plants and animals that lived millions of years ago. The hydrocarbon chains in crude oil were once the proteins and lipids of living, computing cells. The word plastic originally meant able to be molded, and although schools can indeed mold the minds of children, children can also change their minds by themselves, if they choose to do so. Body cells are the worker bees of the colony of the mind. They selflessly sacrifice themselves for the good of the community, be they muscle cells or bone cells or whatever. The neural cells of the brain are worker bees too. Individually, they have no sense of self, although they do compete with other neurons for space within the walls of the cranium and clamour for attention from other neurons, and will babble on endlessly to any other neuron that, unlike you, is inclined to listen. Neurons talk to each other by passing chemical messages called neurotransmitters across junctions called synapses. There are about 100 or so different neurotransmitters of varying molecular types. Each kind of neurotransmitter is largely associated with a particular type of function and with a particular kind of emotion. For example, acetylcholine, the molecule that nicotine imitates, is released by motor neurons to tell muscle cells to contract. Dopamine, which opioids imitate, correlates with pleasure experiences. But like anything in life, it's not that simple, and psychopathologies such as schizophrenia are associated with extreme levels of dopamine. Oxytocin levels rise during breastfeeding and female sexual orgasm. Progesterone supplements prompt the growth of female secondary sexual characteristics in man, such as breasts, and fool the female reproductive system into thinking that it's pregnant, turning off the mechanisms that would normally release an ovum into the fallopian tube. So it's used as a birth control medication. Testosterone supplements lower a woman's voice and prompt increased beard and chest hair growth, as well as boosting muscle and bone growth so she can lift larger weights or run faster. These and other neurotransmitters are the physical messages which relay information from one neuron to another. In normal life, they are prompted by thoughts, often subconscious thoughts, which are reactions to other thoughts and to perceptions. Neurotransmitters also pass information from motor neurons to body cells, which react in their own way, doing such things as raising or lowering heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, muscle movements, and etc. Sensory neurons inside the body detect changes to body cells, relaying information back to the brain, creating the subjective experiences we call our feelings. So thoughts provoke feelings, and perceiving feelings provokes more thoughts. That is how merely the idea of having a godfather or godmother or godsister or brother on your side creates physical effects in your body chemistry that make you feel secure, protected, contented, or even ecstatic. It's also why we can experience all kinds of emotions just from reading books, or watching movies, or listening to music. Recent work in neuroscience is starting to get a handle on the neurophysiological loci of religiosity. One study finding a correlation between serotonin activity and feelings of self-transcendence, and another study finding that religious statements prompted neural activity in different parts of the left cortex of religious people, shown in the upper row, to those activated by non-religious subjects, shown in the lower row. Let's do a little maths. Let P of G be the set of beliefs of a God-follower G, and let P of A be the set of beliefs of an atheist A, and let C be the set of beliefs that G and A have in common, their common sense. Then C is the intersection of P of G and P of A. Now, note that C is a subset of P of G and a subset of P of A as well. So each can say to the other, as Hamlet does to Horatio, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." But just because P of G and P of A have much in difference, that does not imply G and A have no common sense. Seek with an open heart, even if not an open mind, and ye shall find C. Okay, I've given it my best shot. In the next episode, I will turn to a different topic, one that is just as significant to everyday life, just as important to understand. Well, that was a long one.